Okay, welcome everybody back to the latest episode of the Orange Wheel podcast, the podcast where we support business leaders in understanding and navigating the monetary transition. Joined today by Scott Ellam. Scott is the CEO of XCE, a very fascinating business based out of the UK, which really combines Bitcoin and Bitcoin treasury with executive recruitment. Really excited to have the conversation today and to learn about all the exciting things that Scott has going on at XCE. How are you doing today, Scott?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you, Ted. Very good today. It's been a fast-paced start from the IPO a couple of days ago, and doing good.
Yeah, so congratulations on that, by the way. One thing I must say is your energy level is always very high every time we get in touch. Really, it's contagious almost in some ways, but I'm really impressed with how many different things you can keep going simultaneously. Yeah, good. Very cool. Okay, so Scott, I mean, most listeners may not be familiar with XCE yet, despite all the big announcements in the last few weeks. It'd be great to hear about your personal journey, the professional career, of course, the focus on executive search and executive recruitment at Spencer Riley and XCE, and just hearing about that kind of career journey and how Bitcoin kind of has factored into it.
Yeah, of course. And I suppose from a career journey point of view, I can go back to before Spencer Riley, if you like. And the setup right now, we have XCE, it's an Excellent Group PLC, which is the top co, which owns the operating subsidiary, if you like, of a flagship recruitment company, Spencer Riley, which has been going since 2014. Rates around the world. 70% of our revenues are North America, Europe, Middle East. But prior to that, I started Spencer Riley probably in my mid to early 20s. Prior to that was my role as a consultant in the industry, working for what would now be, still to this day, one of my competitors now. I suppose I'd had a fast-paced start to my career, was kind of like the Bitcoin maxi of executive recruitment, in that when I went on the deep dive and I went all in on it, I went all in my first year in the industry, and it was just from whatever time in the morning to whatever time in the evening. That was all I was going to focus my life on for 12 months solid, to decide whether that was the right career for me over the long term. So I very quickly picked up pace as a consultant with clients and candidates, and the size of the deals I was doing in that environment that gave me the confidence to say, okay, within a short period of time, I would like my next objective to be to start my own firm and then start building my own firm at probably an earlier age than a lot of my peers. But I seen that as an advantage at the time because I had no responsibility either. Didn't have the mortgage, didn't have the wife, didn't have kids. So I saw that as, okay, that's the best time in my career to start the business and start moving forward. And it was quite quickly after starting that, 2014, it was 2016 where I was introduced to Bitcoin. And then we went on the journey of personal Bitcoin discovery, Bitcoin business, corporate adoption, if you like, but effectively a private business using Bitcoin as a long-term treasury strategy, to where we are today, which is post-IPO. We've got the board on XCE, we've got the team with XCE to deliver an aggressive Bitcoin strategy, but we believe that this will be I would like to say first time, but I know there's a lot of people say first in this space, but first time a traditional uncorrelated operating business grows as a direct result of a Bitcoin strategy. And I think if we can get that right, and we can demonstrate that and communicate that message effectively to the marketplace, then we're going to help drive Bitcoin corporate adoption in wider business circles, wider industries, and hopefully through the 100,000 mid, senior and executive level connections that Spencer Riley has around the world across different industries. So that's the mission, is build the business, Bitcoin treasury, operating business growing, but also just play a real key role in driving forward Bitcoin corporate adoption. I care about individual people and Bitcoin adoption, truly do. But my experience, my focus and my time and dedication is, how do I combine the business that I love, a Bitcoin strategy, and drive business adoption as well while doing that? Because that's, I suppose, what drives me and gets me out of bed in the morning, if you like.
Love it. No, I think it's a really forward-thinking strategy in some ways. I think as Bitcoiners, I think we see the direction the world's going to be going. I think we don't always necessarily, some of us think it should be going faster than it actually is. But I think of what drives that speed is, of course, the individual activities that we as Bitcoin folks do professionally to move the ball forward, so to speak. And I personally think it's really cool to see, a company really take that torch into the executive recruitment and start establishing itself in the Bitcoin executive recruitment space, which will, I believe, also set you guys up to be quite successful in being a leader in that fast-growing segment. What's a niche today might be a very fascinating and interesting market segment in the future.
Yeah. Niches in our industry are extremely productive for executive recruitment companies. When I started my career, I found two niches that nobody else knew existed. And let's say there's 30 companies in the UK and Europe doing that. And then let's say there's probably 100 globally doing that niche that I found in the early days. That meant there was nobody else specialising within that niche. And that every owner of every business, it was a choice between either being a client or not being a client, which has second order effects in an industry when you're working as a headhunter or a headhunting firm. So quite often the most niche areas are the most productive for businesses like ours, and our industry talks a lot about AI and where the future's going and where the hiring's going. And I just think we are inch wide, mile deep Bitcoin. And I think that division there is picking up pace and getting some really strong clients having conversations with it, really strong candidates having conversations with it. But ultimately, over the next 3, 5, 10 years, that will become one of the most in-demand areas and specialist areas that there will be, because you need to know how to verify somebody understands Bitcoin to be trusted, to place someone at a senior level, to make governance decisions, policy decisions, custody decisions, execution decisions. And it matters that they're experienced. It's not a copy-paste, here's how to do it. They've got to know how to do it.
Certainly. And it's great to hear. I think it's the other really interesting thing about being in that particular service is that you do get that kind of front end of the wave about the companies that are starting to kind of open up these types of decisions in terms of hiring folks with these competencies and experiences. So you can kind of get a bit of an early indication of how this trend is evolving in the corporate space.
Yeah, we see things, this sounds quite grand to say, but we see things before they happen in executive search. You do. So 2019, you got a real sense of the economic shock that was going to come in 2020 in our industry, because you're picking up the phone to CEOs who are saying they've gone through a 6-month process of flying somebody around the world to meet all their team, and they're about to make an offer, and they're saying they can't fly out here, we're going to have to cancel the final meeting. You think that's not happened before in the last decade of being in this industry. This isn't normal. And you sort of you see different areas of the globe stopping before others, because we're working international, we're working sector agnostic, and just in typical day-to-day macro changes or market dynamics, we often see construction drop off before you see a slowdown in an economy or recession in a region. And then you often also see the construction side of the business come back before anything else. And that's a really good indicator for us. Our construction and engineering division tends to be an indicator that does move, not as volatile as Bitcoin, don't get me wrong, but tends to move in cycles that we can see ahead of time, and is often a leading indicator for other markets. So with Bitcoin, we're seeing those first roles coming through. The first 2 roles we've been retained on: Chief Investment Officer, Vice President of Client Relationships. I don't think that will be a pattern that will change too fast, in that it's the sort of roles that can bridge the gap between, hey, this is what this investment fund does, or what this Bitcoin business does. Now, we need the best people possible to communicate it to the right client base who, A, understand it and are Bitcoiners, but B, are the opportunity in the future. And when they do understand it, they will become our clients. And we're seeing them sort of roles become the important ones early on in the space for Bitcoin businesses. And I think that's just a reflection of Bitcoin adoption. It's education before integration and before adoption. So we're a good leading indicator on that. And I probably can't speak about the other roles that we're talking to people about at the moment, but there's some exciting businesses approaching us who are at both ends of the spectrum. Real innovative startups that you can see that is a global product that they're developing. And also the more traditional, this is a traditional business that focuses on Bitcoin, investment funds and the likes.
Amazing. Really, really cool. So again, I think it's a fascinating business. Really excited to see how it evolves and matures. Kind of leads in this exciting growing space. You mentioned about the Bitcoin strategy that XCE has been, and Spencer Riley, I guess, prior to that, have been applying for quite a while now. From what I understand from your previous interviews, that you began accumulating Bitcoin on the balance sheet in 2021. That really that's quite early in the grand scheme of things. I mean, MicroStrategy started in 2020. I think that's when it became a bit more mainstream in many ways, at least amongst people who are outside of the Bitcoin community. So it'd be great to hear, what was the insight or conviction that led you to integrate Bitcoin into the recruitment business? And how did the team react? How did your clients react? And what was the response from your different stakeholders?
Yeah, I mean, the conviction can be simply boiled down to I am absolutely certain at all times, regardless of whatever the sentiment is or the price is, that Bitcoin will always be worth more in the future than it has ever been worth in the past. Mm-hmm. So I worry about us not having enough Bitcoin. I don't worry about the price that we're buying the Bitcoin. And I suppose it probably took 4 years for me personally to reach that decision. And this is why I believe it's quite hard to replicate what we've done. And I wouldn't advise somebody replicating what we've done today without the personal experience of Bitcoin. Because if you don't have that kind of conviction, then being on an 80% drawdown with an automatic buy going out every day can be probably a stressful place, I would imagine, for people who are not ultimately convicted. But it took 2016, 17, 18, 19 to really build my basic understandings of Bitcoin. And that basic of the 21 million hard cap, first time in human history there has ever been a mathematically finite asset that no one can produce any more of. Powerful point, unconfiscatable, portable anywhere. First time nobody can take the asset from you through force or even after death. And first time that you can move the asset anywhere in the world, regardless of what your government or your private bank or any third party wants to do or would say. So it took 4 years probably of really understanding, verifying and intuitively buying it, holding it, understanding how to move it around, just those simple aspects that business owners who are looking at it right now might go, well, I get Bitcoin, but I don't know how to buy it today. It takes a long time to get used to buying it, used to custodying it, upping your level of security with the custody, which is a serious consideration when you're a private business owner with it on the balance sheet, and getting used to, right, okay, here's an optimal multi-sig setup and all of this. But over that 4 year period, I was fortunate that I'd reached the conclusion in my sort of education and adoption from a personal perspective that when they basically globally said we are going to print an extortionate, you could call it, exorbitant, extortionate even, amount of money right now, and we are going to give it to everyone, and that will pay your mortgages and what you would have had as wages, but what you don't have to do is produce anything. We're actually economically incentivizing you to do nothing, which proves that the value of the money and the energy needed to create that new money is zero. It's that moment where you want to do anything you can to help people understand Bitcoin, understand how it can benefit them, understand how it can benefit their business, but also protect yourself with it. So personally, I'm at that stage, and it was only a few months later that you get somebody who's got the sort of foresight, background and experience that allows you to trust that they've been there, they've been through the mill, they know what they're doing, and they've got a history and a track record of predicting technology that gets adopted widely into the future. So you look at Michael Saylor in that year, when he buys Bitcoin on his public balance sheet, and you look at what he was saying about Apple stocks and everybody holding an iPhone, and all Apple need to do every year is make it slightly lighter and slightly cooler, and battery lasts slightly longer, and that's it. 8 billion people are going to want one. And I got a new one the other week, and I was like, it's pretty much the same thing, but it is. The battery's lasted a lot longer. It's a little bit sharper imaging. It's a nicer colour. It's orange. When he bought Bitcoin on his public company balance sheet, it just gave the sign-off to someone like me who's personally allocated to it, who owns a private business 100% and can make the decision the day after that, okay, right, that's the solution for our balance sheet for the long term and the way to protect and preserve long-term savings in this business. I no longer need to worry about how do we allocate that cash reserve that we've not touched for 4 years and has been dwindling in value for 4 years. Well, I don't want to buy shares in another company. That's too much risk on behalf of the staff and the team. And I don't want to buy gold and put a safe in the office because A, that's too risky for the staff and the team and too heavy to carry up in the lift. And I don't want to buy the building because that means I have to put a 20% deposit down, which is a lot for a business like ours, and also then take an 80% loan and leverage up to buy a building that's illiquid, might burn down, might not have any tenants, and the council might charge us significant tax for owning it if it's empty. So it just gave me that real simple solution of, right, that's the balance sheet asset, that's the primary balance sheet asset. I didn't need to have them conversations with myself. I've been waiting for it for 4 to 5 to 10 years, the solution. Now found it. October 2021, I'll say group companies. It was for group companies, so you had to ensure that you were doing things the right way and being able to segregate. So group companies adopt the strategy 2021. Spencer Riley balance sheet is now exposed to primary reserve asset Bitcoin. And from that moment forward, you're in a situation where you've found that solution for the long-term store of value, but the price is dropping down 80% pretty quickly after that first buy. If I hadn't have had the conviction I'd already built in my personal life, then it may have been a more difficult conversation with the management accountants and the people who were involved in executing what I'm dictating, if you like.
Yeah.
But they believed in my conviction and they understand the business, and they've become more and more educated on the asset over those years when the price is going down. I think it's helped orange pill, if you like, and helped people like that who wouldn't have been exposed to Bitcoin understand the degree of certainty that somebody who's doing a strategy like that has. Whereas when they've not met a Bitcoiner in real life and they're told to imagine somebody who puts all of their personal money into Bitcoin and all of their balance sheet into Bitcoin, they can come up with some pretty wild assumptions of what that person is like. And I think that's helped businesses close to me, partners close to me, staff who are working within the business really sort of embrace the asset and embrace the hope that Bitcoin delivers to people. And since going through the IPO and coming out publicly and stating this publicly and having conversations and posting on LinkedIn, which is probably the first LinkedIn post about Bitcoin for me, is one way. I'm not really a social media type of guy in general. And there's 10,000 followers for Spencer Riley. There's 100,000 connections within all the consultants in the room. And you just don't quite know how they're going to respond about Bitcoin. But I'm past that. I'm ready to go public and we're ready to execute the strategy and help people understand it and integrate it and adopt it. If I'd have done that 4 years ago, I might have got a very different reaction. So I have a lot of people to thank for being able to do what we're doing right now and join the journey at the right time for this business and help try and accelerate broader Bitcoin adoption, because there's a lot of people who've gone before me with their real name, reputations, and taken that career risk and mitigated it for those who come after.
That's great. I mean, really a lot there that I'd like to follow up on, but I guess the one thing that really sticks with me is this idea you brought up of like demonstrating, and I guess even orange pilling others through your own actions, I suppose, right? As opposed to, I think it's very challenging, I think, as Bitcoiners, when we think about trying to convince others of the benefits of Bitcoin. You can talk a lot about the fundamental properties, the global monetary system, the unsustainability of it, all the theory and technical aspects. And you can even say, I also am a maxi or something, or I hold a significant portion of my money in Bitcoin. But I guess there's probably nothing stronger than actually going through a downturn and witnessing somebody or a colleague or a client or something and actually persevere through it with that conviction to convert another, change another person's mind and perspective on it. So I think it's really cool to hear that story. And I think you're right. I guess with the timing, it's about taking the timing and the communications and the pivot at the right moment in terms of where the zeitgeist is and where the market maturity is. So really, really cool story there. With that, I'd like to kind of move on to discuss a little bit more about XCE's business model. It's great that you provide that context about XCE being the parent company, the top co. Yeah. And then Spencer Riley being the subsidiary, the operating business with underneath that. So if we talk about, the XCE's mission, and if I understand this properly, and correct me if I did get some information wrong here, it's about kind of connecting human capital to digital capital. Is this a phrase that you're kind of using within the business? Yeah. So I'd like to just understand, within a few words, like what does that mean from an operational perspective? Kind of what does that mean in practice, and maybe just elaborate a bit more on that vision.
So from an operational perspective, the number one driver for growing revenues and profits in an executive recruitment company is attracting high-performing, experienced human capital, if you like. Experienced consultants who can come into the business, sit down at the desk and immediately start using their pre-existing network of clients and candidates to generate revenue and profit for the business. So we would target each individual that we hire, it would be a minimum of 200,000 revenue, but 300,000 to 500,000 revenue is a typically strong, good biller. You have people who will do individually 750 to a million a year. Now, if I just take that good, strong biller of 300,000 a year as an example, they would quite often be on a modest basic salary and high commission and might earn £120,000 per year personally and cost the business £30,000. So they're at a 50% net profit there. Bring in 300,000, cost 150,000. How do you grow the executive recruitment company? How do you attract 1, 5, 10, 50, 100 people who want to do that for your business? Well, every business offers a similar basic salary. Every business offers a similar commission scheme. But it is extremely rare in our industry for a business like ours to be A, public, and B, there is nobody with a Bitcoin strategy who is both Bitcoin strategy and public. So what we can do in order to create a human capital talent attraction magnet to the business is we can say, if you join this business, you still get your basic salary, you still get your high commission, and you can still earn your high fiat salary and commissions. But on top of that, there's a free option, if you like, and that is performance-based, tax-beneficial share option incentives. So if you join on day one and you are a verified £500,000 biller, there's a portion of share options that you can secure on the basis you deliver the £500,000 for the business over the next 12 months. So if you bring in the revenue and the profit, we can buy Bitcoin with it. The more people who join the business who can develop more revenue and more profit, the more it supports our shareholder value, and hopefully that's reflected in our share price. The more Bitcoin we can buy organically and operationally with our cash flows, and the more incentive there is for the people joining the business to become Bitcoin buying machines. They still get their basic salary, they still get their commission, but there's this delayed share option for people where they have some hope that they can secure the share options. And then if you think about it, what you can do then is you're doing it 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 5 year, 7 year. You provide a talent attraction mechanism for the business, a talent motivation mechanism for the business, and a talent retention motivation for the business. So the team within the company who are there to generate revenue and profit, value aligned with the shareholders and value aligned with the board. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, if you like, of the more talent you attract, the more attractive you become to the talent, the more attractive your share price is, the more attractive you become to the other talent, and the more Bitcoin you can buy organically, which makes the business more attractive to the capital markets and the capital allocators who may decide to portion, over the next 5 to 10 years. I can imagine there's going to be, there already is, and I've spoken to people who run these types of companies, but the funds that invest in businesses exposed to Bitcoin, those funds are going to grow, and we position ourselves as we're the traditional operating business that grows as a direct result of the Bitcoin treasury. So it's a compounding flywheel between the better the talent that we attract, the more supportive the Bitcoin treasury is, the more aggressive that can be with the capital markets. The more aggressive that is with the capital markets, the more talent we can attract, and that just compounding flywheel to just add value for shareholders.
Really cool. Yeah, I really understand now better that kind of virtuous circle in a sense of how it kind of self-reflects upon itself. Not too dissimilar from how the the MicroStrategy concept that's more exclusive to the capital markets and the financial products. But I love seeing, what really excites me the most is seeing Bitcoin strategies applied in a variety of different industrial and operational contexts. So I think it's really cool. And I think an underexplored area that it's really cool to hear XCE going into is more on the incentive side, right? How can you use Bitcoin as a means by which to differentiate yourself from your competitors on incentive structures for your consultants, for your executive team, and so forth. So really, really cool to see that area get fleshed out and people experiment and create new strategies in that respect. Amazing. Next question is in relation to I guess maybe it's just worth kind of following up briefly, I guess, on this. Like, are you seeing, I imagine a lot of the consultants who maybe are those 500,000 or plus earners are not yet orange pilled into Bitcoin. So how are they responding to this kind of differentiated offering? Do some of the most just get it intuitively, instantly, or is there kind of a self-selection process where the ones who already understand Bitcoin are the ones that get attracted, or are there people who are curious and willing to kind of learn more? Or, I mean, what's been the response from the recruitment side of the business when you're looking at providing such incentives to your prospective employees?
Well, I've been working with the XCE team for a number of months to laser focus on the effectiveness of the execution for the IPO. So I'm meeting with our recruitment company's marketing team and the managerial team from a recruitment company this week to discuss what's our 2026 strategy to execute the hiring for each individual team within there on a more granular basis. And the best reflection for how this has gone down in the marketplace is I've had people approach me who are senior leaders in our space and extremely experienced, very good executors in our industry, who've approached me who've turned out to be Bitcoin maximalists and MicroStrategy investors who immediately get the business model and like, this is what I want to be doing. I want to join the mission. I want to execute on this. And here's ideas from my previous experience that we can implement to this and really turn the screw on it and really go forward throughout next year. But on the same note, I'm hearing from people who are not necessarily MicroStrategy investors, not necessarily Bitcoiners, but fundamentally, they're not in our business at the moment. We're having a confidential conversation. But they understand share options. So the Bitcoin adoption that we see over the next 5 to 10 years, I know some maximalists don't want to hear that people might not self-custody Bitcoin and they might not buy Bitcoin, and that's held back adoption somewhat. Those people who we're speaking to in our industry to join XCE Connecting Excellence Group, who are high-performing consultants, only really need to understand share options and have a strong belief in the business model and some sort of understanding of how Bitcoin has improved balance sheets over time. And that understanding can be given by saying, well, look, we bought over the last 4 years for an 80% drawdown and this is how much we are up. We want to replicate that on a much bigger scale. And you can join the business now and earn some share options based on your performance. They don't need to know how to custody a share option. They don't need to know how to multi-sig a share option. They don't need to worry about where it's held and whether it's going to get hacked. They've not necessarily needed to adopt Bitcoin, but they're now aligned with Bitcoin and hoping Bitcoin does what we believe it will do. And they're now incentivized to study it as well. So I've seen that. But the best example is probably just for people who are already in the business, who are at different stages in their understanding of Bitcoin, and some of them were, I would say, are Bitcoin maximalists. They're obviously speaking to our Bitcoin clients, but some of which have just had me speak about it over the last few years, and it's kind of been an osmosis point where they've just not had that need and that urgency to look at Bitcoin and understand it in detail and really sort of do a deep dive on it, or even the time. They've been recruiting, you see, so it's an intense role as it is. I've not seen anybody spending the day watching podcasts in the office, but they've not had that motivation or need throughout their own personal lives, but they've I suppose had it by osmosis through conversations in the office with me, and they've built intrigue and they now understand it and they now understand the business model, and they're highly motivated because it's a great opportunity long term for people like that who are at the early stages of their careers, who can now see a long-term future with the business, where they say, you know, from what he's saying, this could be a business that lasts forever based on the execution and based on what we can deliver in this business. It's down to the people in the business to execute, and they're extremely excited about that.
Awesome. That's cool that you kind of bring up those different kind of categories of folks, and I think it makes good sense. That first one as well, I think that's something that when I first made the pivot away from my traditional career to start my own business in the Bitcoin space, I think it's something I've heard from many other folks like yourself as well who have made a pivot to a Bitcoin strategy for their business, where once you kind of put yourself out there and say, this is what I'm all about, you start, as you said, kind of creating a bit of a magnet for those folks that are inspired by it, that are also Bitcoin believers. And it kind of becomes this automatic, it creates opportunities that you wouldn't have otherwise thought would be out there. So it's really encouraging within the community. And then I kind of understand like those other kind of categories of folks that are, maybe not on the maxi spectrum, that are on the curious. And then, as you said, those that are now their financial returns are now a function of Bitcoin, so it incentivizes a broad, better understanding. But I must ask, I mean, have there been any instances where there are folks that have just been really on the opposite side of the spectrum saying, because of this, I actually have take issue with it, I don't believe in it, I want to get out, I totally disagree fundamentally with Bitcoin? Have there been any cases where folks really respond from a negative perspective to the pivot?
I've not had any negative reflections from anybody external to a business, so we've not had any sort of client say, what is this you're doing? Or candidates say, what is this you're doing? We have just had congratulations and excitement, I have to say. If I think back to the first time I spoke about Bitcoin in the office, though, that was different. Not in a negative way, but the first time I took everybody through Bitcoin, I'm unable to give financial advice, of course. But I've been asked, what should we do? There's people in the office who might earn, it's a role that pays as good as you are. So sometimes there's moments where everybody knows in the office that that one individual who's had an incredible quarter and put up some phenomenal figures is now about to receive a £20,000 or a £30,000 bonus this month. And they can be at in the late 20s, it might be in 30s, it might be in 40s or 50s. It really doesn't matter. It's a self-sovereign industry where you get paid as good as you are for that quarter. And I've had messages from people at a young age who've not maybe got on the property ladder yet, where they said, what can I do to invest this money? Because I've got all this money coming in. I said, I can't give you any advice on how to invest your money. But then I've been asked for a little bit of like, well, can you give us some sort of just asset class explaining what they are? So I've took the opportunity to say, okay, I'll talk to you all about asset classes if you like. I'll do a session on it, who wants to come? And then just took them through 2 hours, I think maybe 3 hours, from the history of money, Bretton Woods, 1971, fiat money, gold, S&P, Bitcoin, property, classic cars, Rolexes. Let's compare everything you're going to understand, and let's compare the different risks, rewards, serious risks, how to spot that this is not actually what you're being sold, and just a bit of like, here's what my thoughts are and what my experience has been throughout my own life. And I remember the first session we did on that, one of the most intelligent young guys I've ever worked with who was in the office, probably know who I'm referring to now and be pleased if he listens to this one, but he's a very analytical mind, and he was the most sceptical person, and he came at it from a real sceptical angle of the questioning, and this is in front of everybody else. So I'm going back and forward with him on the questioning. Now, I'm probably the sort of person who you can put in a room with 20 people and have a conversation about Bitcoin, and you're not going to get back and forward with me and come out of the conversation going, yep, I told you I was right. You're going to walk out going, okay, I've got stuff to think about. And it took him a little bit longer to maybe come round to the, it's so simple, obvious, and it makes so much rational and logical sense when you really do a deep dive into Bitcoin. But because it's so counterintuitive to everything that's gone before, highly analytical people will do the deep dive. And he's probably the person who went from skeptic to then, once he'd done that deep dive, just right, I get it. Mm-hmm. And he's very involved in helping us the business to be able to execute in the Bitcoin space. So yeah, really it's been quite interesting.
Yeah, and it's great to hear that there's that kind of receptivity of your folks to kind of just learn about financial education, economic history, monetary history more generally, and that you also took the time to kind of provide that additional service to your employees. So I think that's also just a really good tip for folks who are also trying to kind of consider making that pivot to their business and how to bring the employees along for the ride. Let's kind of dive into now the new, board and leadership team around XCE. It's quite impressive, the people that you've assembled around you. You have Sam Roberts from Cartwright, Vijay Salam, Richard Byworth from Seas, and of course Adam Back of Bitcoin, the OG of Bitcoin. So, I noticed, I think the common thread, one of them is, of course, they're all Brits. So that's fitting, of course. But it'd be great to hear kind of how did you bring these folks together, and ultimately what is it that they bring to XCE that you see, what competencies and roles were they going to play in having XCE accomplish its mission?
Well, I've thought about doing this for a couple of years, and I casually mentioned to a very well-known Canadian Bitcoiner that I was thinking of doing this, and they I was testing the thesis, and they came to the same conclusion as me, which is the regulatory risk is too high a year or two ago. And we've had that dissipated in the UK this year, in the first half of the year. And as that risk has dissipated, the timing's become right for XCE Connecting Excellence to go forward with our mission. So in May, June, the first conversations, it's an executive recruitment company, it's a headhunting business. I'm not naive to the fact that the board I build at the start of this is going to be a judgment on the capabilities of the company to build an executive leadership team and a board for a client as well. And the first person I reached out to I'd never spoke to before was Richard Byworth. So if you look at our website, the person who you haven't mentioned there who's a Brit is Joe Bryan from
Okay.
What's the
Yes.
Problem.
Yes.
So Joe is partnered with the business as a pro bono, no money, no payment of shares or anything like that. He wanted to do this absolutely pro bono education advisor to allow the business to introduce Joe when it suits XCE. So if we have a huge networking event going on and they want someone to speak, but they don't want Scott stood in front of it, who everybody knows at the networking event, talking about his public business, they want to just understand Bitcoin for themselves and their businesses, then we are able to, because I've got a good relationship with Joe, let Joe know, and if it's suitable for Joe, he can go and educate a networking team and do what he does best, which is educate the world on Bitcoin. So we've got Joe there as well as a Brit, as a pro bono education advisor, and that might be, we work with KPMG, they've already got their own Bitcoiner internally, I think me and you have both met him. We work with PwC, but if an organisation of that size wants us to speak to him about Bitcoin, we can let Joe know, and if Joe can do it, Joe can go. And we just want to help Bitcoin education, integration and adoption. Joe was the only person I knew before I started this process who's on the board, other than Sam Roberts at Cartwrights. But I've got a pretty strong network within Bitcoin. So I reached out to Richard Byworth, flew out to Zurich to meet Richard, had the whole day with Richard where I went through the history of me, the business, everything we plan to do, a deep dive into the operational setup, the business model that I'm proposing, and then we quickly came to a conclusion that we were going to partner on this and he was going to join as board advisor and help take this towards IPO. Richard's got an incredibly strong network. The business is an executive recruitment company. We've got people identified who we believe are right. So VJ Selvin, for conversations with VJ is, I should probably say what Richard does for those who haven't listened to him, but the reason I flew to Zurich, Richard's been in capital markets for 20 plus years. He was managing director for Nomura's convertible bonds, futures trading, derivatives desk. He has a deep understanding of the capital markets and structuring financial products, but he's also a Bitcoin maximalist. So if you put them both together, he has a deep understanding of how to structure Bitcoin-denominated financial products. And his proof of work is he launched the largest, or led the launch of the largest Bitcoin-denominated hedge fund in Switzerland. And I think it was the largest hedge fund launch in Switzerland over the last decade. That's holding 5,000 Bitcoin and looking to achieve, I think, between 3 and 6% return denominated in Bitcoin. So you want somebody like that in the team and get on well, and yes, there's a British theme there, even if he lives in a low tax jurisdiction. VJ Selvin, so you've got VJ Selvin with a background of a senior head of governance at Goldman Sachs for Southeast Asia, on calls with Ben Bernanke, restructuring deals after the financial crash, knows the problem in a deep sense and was a gold bug for a number of years. He's now a chief counsel on a digital asset exchange that's listed on the NASDAQ. He's a Harvard lawyer, Oxford solicitor, an incredibly intelligent guy who is really good at strategic execution as well, which is such a rare combination, and Bitcoin maximalist. So VJ Selvin has been incredibly helpful throughout the process, and I suppose from the point of view of VJ, he's also wrote a great book, Principles of Bitcoin, which really helps capital markets people and traditional investors understand Bitcoin thesis. So we're building a board of Bitcoin maximalists here, and Sam Roberts led the first British pension fund allocation, which is no small feat in the UK to have a Bitcoin allocation in a pension fund. And Cartwrights, to be able to do that, have been through a process of deep due diligence on exchanges, custodians, governance, policies, to be able to get to the level of robust compliance processes and security a pension fund needs. We partnered with Cartwrights as a service agreement for them to do the due diligence, governance, policies with the exchanges and custodians and bring us back their proposals of best practice for a Bitcoin treasury company. So we're confident in the security, compliance and execution side. Sam joined as non-executive chairman to join the mission, and Sam has a real passion for business Bitcoin or corporate Bitcoin adoption. And I think Sam coined the term Chief Bitcoin Officer, and he won't let me say I coined it. He did coin it. More useful if he let me use it. So Sam coined the term of Chief Bitcoin Officer, and this is an opportunity for Sam to be involved in a team that are going to deliver that future into a wider business environment. And then Angus Gladish, you need somebody who's a city-facing CFO with main market listing experience to be able to give you robust structures in place to progress a business forward. Angus came into a process not a Bitcoiner and read the Bitcoin standard, has been spent hours upon hours with all of us and is ready to execute on this. But I think it's been really beneficial in front of institutional investors and in front of the traditional investors to have the CFO come in, adopt Bitcoin through the process in his own personal mindset, and adopt the business strategy and be able to give them that reassurance that, hey, I've come from where you are on that side of the table as we're going through that educational process with the institutional investors. So that's the team we have across the board. And then outside of the team of XCE Connecting Excellence, we have Adam back as a key strategic investor. Now, Richard introduced me to Adam very early on in the process. And I think Richard and Adam, from their conversation, it sounded like Richard had done a really clinical sort of communication of what my plans were, because Adam obviously has a kind of instinct where he can understand a business pretty quickly when you're explaining to him about the business. And me and Adam had a great conversation where I talked him through the plans exactly as I'd talked him through Richard, and exactly as I've probably talked them through at the end of the process with investors and on podcasts pre-IPO. And Adam sort of got to the end and he said, this could be the first opportunity for a traditional business to grow as a direct result of Bitcoin treasury strategy. I thought, that's exactly what I believe, but it's hard to communicate to other people. So we have investors, board advisors, XCE team and me, all aligned in that mission. And then the team at Spencer Island Flagship Operating Company aligned in that mission. And then the investors who we want to bring on board, we want them to understand where we're going, and we want them to understand that our business is kind of as uncorrelated as it is to Bitcoin in some areas. It's synergized with Bitcoin in that our business is reliant on people understanding it, people adopting it, if you like, joining it, investing in it, being part of the team. But it's reliant on human network effects, and we work internationally. So it's probably the most synergized with Bitcoin from a people perspective without necessarily the technological network effects. It's people network effects and technological network effects that drive both aspects of the company forward. And I hope we've proved with the board we've got that we are capable at networking and putting together good teams.
Certainly. I mean, it's a really all-star lineup that you have there. So, and really complementary skill sets as well. So really impressive, I must say, at the very least. And I think setting you guys up for pretty strong success, I would imagine. And then I think that the follow-up there kind of is a nice segue, I think, as you described it, but the kind of equity story that you're taking to the capital markets now that you're a public company. I think you've kind of elaborated in many different ways and kind of what this value proposition is to investors. But maybe just the opportunity to kind of maybe reiterate it or say it in another way. What is the reason, and maybe this is maybe a more provocative question of prompting on this, but like, why would an investor invest in XCE and not a pure play Bitcoin treasury company that is either MicroStrategy or maybe an equivalent of MicroStrategy listed in the UK, if such a thing exists? What's your perspective in terms of the value proposition to equity investors in vis-a-vis a pure play?
Yeah, I may not be able to answer that question as immediately and as in detail as you might like me to, Ted, and I would need to just take a rain check on how much detail I'm going to there. But I would say first and foremost, if somebody's thinking of investing in businesses that hold Bitcoin and have a business model operating and core to Bitcoin, if you like, is to first and foremost study Bitcoin and understand Bitcoin and build their conviction in Bitcoin. And a lot of the capital that comes into this space is trapped capital escaping through the release valve that we're creating, which is if it's trapped in retirement accounts, if it's trapped in tax-free investment accounts, if it's taxed in different jurisdictions in trusts and mandated to invest in equities and stocks and shares, if it's institutions that are mandated to invest in stock shares and in different jurisdictions, then I would like to think that those investors understand Bitcoin and have that conviction in Bitcoin, because these businesses, as you know, can be more volatile than Bitcoin, but that's volatile to the upside, and sometimes that can be volatile to the downside as well. I think where we're positioning our business is we want that we want to amplify the returns on Bitcoin as a simple result of the fact that we are buying as much Bitcoin as we can, and with that always mandated to increase Bitcoin per share for investors. And just saying Bitcoin per share depends what environment you're in, because traditional investors are coming around to understanding the Bitcoin per share mechanism that's instinctively understood by Bitcoiners and Bitcoin treasury company investors. But we're there to increase Bitcoin per share. But I would say from an operating business point of view, we have an ambitious Bitcoin treasury strategy focused on increasing Bitcoin per share. And we will be able to use the levers that we have when it comes to accelerated placing agreements, when it comes to having the opportunity to design with a team that's extremely experienced, Bitcoin-denominated convertible bonds that should be very attractive to institutions in the future. And when it comes down to growing an operating business with human capital leverage, if that's a term that you can use, where you're attracting revenue-generating and cash flow-generating people into the business for their benefit, the business's benefit, and the shareholders' benefits, and you're going forward. What I would hope is that gives them a proposition where it's a business that has a potential to outperform Bitcoin, but also has the flow that we've got an operating business growing as a direct result of Bitcoin, that ideally puts us in a rational position to say we should always be worth more than the Bitcoin that we own, which should always allow us to be able to access capital accretively for shareholders. Now, the bits where the operating business maybe helps support that thesis is when Bitcoin went down in price from 2022 to 2023 by 80%, the operating business doubled in revenue over them years. And that's because it's non-correlated to Bitcoin. And if the Bitcoin price is going down, it doesn't mean construction, engineering, logistics, life sciences and professional services aren't hiring more. There's no correlation between them. Obviously, there's a minimal correlation between them. So the business can grow as a direct result of Bitcoin strategy regardless of what Bitcoin price is doing. But then there's the synergy between it, whereas when Bitcoin does really rally, sentiment's really high, we're placing senior executives in Bitcoin, and that brings on the next wave of corporate adoption. Doesn't matter what the sentiment is when you've had that wave, if it doesn't just start going up continually for a long period of time without them drawdowns. But in them drawdowns, those people who are hiring have got full conviction, so they don't make a different decision. The businesses that are hiring now are not pausing hiring or not wondering about whether they should hire. They've got the conviction from multiple previous cycles. So each wave of adoption just brings in a new opportunity to gain more clients, plug more clients into the business and help them new clients. So I think that's the proposition from an investor point of view of our business. It's not quite pure play. It's a synergy between the business and the Bitcoin treasury strategy, but we want to be able to execute each and every leverage opportunity of financial markets and innovative financial products as we can, and put them both together to compound value between both sides.
Yeah, that's great. And I certainly think in general, the more options there are available for generating a yield, the better. And of course, the less correlated they are, even better. And so I totally again, I think I've mentioned a few times, but what fascinates me is operating businesses with Bitcoin strategies. And as you brought up, the treasury, the pure play treasury companies, sometimes the capital market window is open and sometimes it's not open, and sometimes sentiment's low.
Yeah.
And I guess when you have an operating business, you're totally right. It should always trade above the asset value of the Bitcoin itself, because you have this means by which to generate cash flow that can accumulate more Bitcoin. So I think that's a really fascinating approach. And then of course, using the capital markets and the financial products when the opportunities arise to tap that as well. So really, really cool. As we kind of reach the end of our discussion here, there's a lot of other questions we didn't have time to get to. I hope to kind of cover those maybe in another follow-up meeting down the road. But it'd be great to hear kind of immediate plans now for XCE. What's kind of on the horizon when you start going into 2026? What are some exciting milestones that might be coming up in the new year?
Depending on when this one goes out, Ted. So we've executed our first 2 buys over our first 2 days on the market. So we bought on day 1, we bought on day 2, we've announced those. We plan to buy more Bitcoin throughout 2026. We plan to buy that when it's accretive to shareholders and increasing Bitcoin per share. Like I said, we also are speaking to institutions in and outside of the UK for longer term partnerships, and we're speaking to investors in and outside of the UK for longer term partnerships, and we are designing products that we believe will be appealing to long-term investors, such as the Bitcoin-denominated convertible bonds that we're drafting, and making sure that we can try and get those absolutely right and as attractive for not just bondholders but shareholders as you can. And I'm pretty sure people will be pleased with the results of those. Outside of that, we're also looking at where and how can we put the pipes in place for more people to join this journey with us. Now, it was important to emphasise to Adam and Richard, who have access to lots of contacts in this space, that we wanted to start this business with a small market cap and take investors on the journey. So 2026 is about, we're now on the market, 2026 is about taking people on that journey through 2026 for the first stage. Now, with that in mind, we want to make sure we're opening up the pipes for more people to join that journey and participate with us, which means we would like to see the business in the early stages of 2026 become available on dual listings overseas and allow people to access who, not just new investors and Bitcoiners and Bitcoin treasury company investors, but we have 100,000 connections in the business who are based all around the world. There's people who want to participate in the journey who are candidates and clients and all that kind of stuff, I'm sure. And if we can put ourselves in as many areas as possible for people to access the journey, then that's what we want to do. So we've got a few things lined up to execute in Q1 2026, but I suppose I'll have to give you the regulatory news service announcements to absolutely be clear on what those are, Ted, as I'd love to go into a bit of detail, but
Totally understand. Yeah, it's a different ballgame once
time.
you're a publicly listed company. So I appreciate you disclosing what you're at liberty to do at this stage. So before we wind up, Scott, it's been a fantastic conversation. Just like to hear, for those who are listening that might want to learn more about the equity offering, the stock, if they want to learn more about that, what is the ticker? Where is it listed? And then for those who maybe want to get in touch with yourself at XCE or learn more about the company, where can they go to do that?
Yeah, well, to get in touch with me, I am BTC only Scott, so Bitcoin only Scott. I have been for a few years and I've kept that handle and moved on to my real name. I'm also on LinkedIn under Scott Ellam. You'll find me on there. And then the business, XCE Connecting Excellence on LinkedIn and XCE Official on X. And if you'd like to see where our jobs are advertised at the moment, the ones I've just discussed, Chief Investment Officers, Vice President of Client Relationships, then the advertisements are based on both our XCE Connecting Excellence LinkedIn, but also our Spencer Riley website has an area dedicated just to Bitcoiners, which Bitcoiners won't need any help finding, but our traditional clients might not necessarily see the signs where to enter that area of the website. So feel free to visit both, have a real good look around, and then introduce yourself to me. And if you're better served having a conversation with someone else in the business for your benefit, then I can introduce you to the right person in the team as well. Yeah, please do get in touch. And the stocks and the shares, Ted, we are listed on Aquis under the ticker XCE. AJ Bell, I believe you still have to type Connecting Excellence Group in there. Ticker should be flagging up very shortly. Hargreaves Lansdown, Connecting Excellence Group, XCE. Interactive Investor, I've been promised we will go on board tomorrow. And then IG for people who are based overseas. I've had confirmation that we're now available on IG. Other areas, Charles Schwab, Interactive Brokers. I've been given the comfort in the first couple of days. If you call and specifically request, then you're likely to be able to be given access to it as well. So that's how to find us. That's how to participate and have a look at what we have to offer from a stock perspective as well.
Lots of exciting ways to kind of follow you guys and get involved, whether it be from the recruitment side, investing side, social side, and so forth. Really great. Yeah. We'll make sure we put all that information into the description of the video. With that, Scott, it's been a fantastic discussion today. Really excited to follow XCE and keep in touch through 2026. And maybe meet in person again at some of these events happening in Europe and the UK next year. So thanks so much, and wishing you happy holidays and a happy new year as well.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ted. Happy holidays, happy new year. Look forward to seeing you in 2026.
Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.